Welcome to the Gals Guide to the Galaxy podcast, where a group of gals gather for you one cool thing around our topic of the month. Is it ancient history? Is it breaking news? Is it safe for work? Well, that's up to each gal. All we know is that...
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome back. I'm Katie, and I'm joined by Bonnie, Leah, and JC talking about our one cool LGBTQ gal. Bonnie already talked about Leslie Gore. JC introduced us to Rosa Bonner. Leah talked about Barbara May Cameron. But before we get into my one cool thing for you all, Leah would like to tell us what's on the Gals Guide calendar for this week.
Exactly. So for the week of June 27th through July 3rd, we are having a book club meeting on Zoom led by our lovely Katie Harris. That's right. So join us to talk about Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. Yes. Thursday, June 30th at 8 p.m. Don't forget to register beforehand. That way you get the Zoom link. You can register at galsguide.org. Mm-hmm. This weekend, we will also have the team at the In Conjunction Sci-Fi Fantasy Convention. Friday through Sunday, we are going to be hosting great women's history panels. And we're going to be talking about pirates, about Alison Bechdel, about Carrie Fisher, about Mary Shelley, and like way, way more. So weekend passes and day passes are available at the door. The event is at the Indianapolis Marriott East, and we will have a booth with books. We're going to bring our sci-fi books. A book booth.
A book booth.
A book booth. And we're going to have books for sale. So check out all of our calendar events at galsguide.org. Katie, you have a really deep get-to-know-you question for us, don't you?
And I just think, one, we should all be asking ourselves all the time.
Yes.
Truly. I would like to know how you guys think we can build an atmosphere of inclusion regardless of our personal or religious views.
I like it. Okay, Bonnie, I have
one off the bat.
I was ready to go, and then I'm like, but Bonnie's taking in oxygen. She's ready for this.
I'm reminded of a sign that I saw outside of a local music venue.
Yes.
That just said, "Don't be a dick."
The Will Wheaton rule of the universe. Yes, I like it.
Don't be a dick. It's none of your damn business.
Right.
Just don't be a dick.
Yes.
Leave people alone.
See?
That's so funny you say that, Bonnie, because one of my things that I was kind of reflecting on, and I think you're absolutely right. I understand the sentiment behind what you're saying. But I've always had that kind of, leave people alone, whatever kind of thing. But I've actually realized that one of the best things you can do too is ask questions.
Oh yeah,
because then you get to know people. Yep. It's either leave them alone or engage to our fellow people, because we're all just people together.
Yeah.
But it did used to make me feel uncomfortable asking questions to people in minority groups that I'm not a part of, because I didn't want to be insensitive anyway. But I think as time's gone by and I've spent more time with a variety of people, I've realized, no, that's what's important to do, because otherwise you're going to assume things if you don't ask. And that's worse than asking.
Right, exactly.
100%.
I remember at one point it was when the Gals Guide meetings were in my living room. And we had a lesbian, a total lesbian comedian who was unapologetically
that was one of my breakthrough experiences with that, because I was so intensely uncomfortable.
And wasn't it lovely though?
Because the other thing was one of our other members was asking such pointed questions of her that I was like, holy shit, I can't handle this.
But it was kind of great because it was such an open dialogue, to the point where it's even you straight white people are so weird. And it's yes, we are. We're all weird. You know what I mean? It was kind of lovely.
You find a connection within that.
Yeah, to learn, that what seemed to be kind of an awkward question turned into just such a connection. We just felt like, oh my gosh, we get each other's weird now. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was fantastic.
Don't be a dick and be open to people.
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
I mean, it's great to ask questions, but it's if you're out somewhere and you're like, is that a boy or a girl? It's
does it
matter? All right, that's not an okay question.
Right? Exactly.
Who the fuck cares? Are you trying to engage in a sexual relationship with this person? Then leave it alone.
Right. Exactly.
I think that's a super good point, because there are many things that are not your business, and you definitely have to gauge if somebody wants to have that conversation with you.
Right.
Very valid.
Yeah.
Exactly. For me, okay. It's because I'm going through this wonderful Buddhism class. So stick with me. It's going to be Buddhist, but then it's not going to be Buddhist like instantly. Okay. So there's this really cool methodology for inclusion and for loving compassion. And it's to think, whether you believe it or not, is that we were all each other's mothers at one point. So we've all been each other's mothers. We will all be each other's mothers. In other words, we will all take care of one another and we will all be taken care of by each other. So if you go with that spirit, you know what I mean? Whether you believe in reincarnation or whether you just like wishful drinking, the idea of, you know what? Maybe in another life or maybe in another galaxy or string theory or whatever, that was my baby. You know what I mean? And so you just love everybody, for crying out loud, and treat them like human beings. Don't be a dick and ask questions. But JC, what about you?
Oh, I'm grappling with this.
I know, exactly. I just realized it sucks going last sometimes because then you're like,
I know.
Sometimes I just say ditto.
Yeah, that is fair.
You got it.
Yes.
Well, and it's like, I keep thinking, well, what on like a federal level can we do?
Yes, no, very important. Yes.
And like, I don't have an answer for that.
Right. Exactly.
And then like, it's okay. Well, what about the state? And then it looked like I think what it comes down to is like community based.
Yes.
How do we
homegrown inclusion?
Grassroots efforts.
Yes, exactly.
And how do we interact with the community around us in a way that don't be a dick.
Yep.
Be uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable.
Right.
Ask questions. And I think just kind of creating that culture for yourselves because, I don't know, every cultural group, even the United States is huge.
Yeah, right?
There's, things are different in cities than they are in smaller towns.
Right.
Even in a mid-sized city like Noblesville. And,
yeah.
There's so many different pockets of people, and the internet makes it so that,
right.
Even if you are in a rural area, you can still have access to different trains of thought.
Right.
And there's so many different facets that it's hard to come up with an answer. But I think generally it should be something community-based that, you're impacting one person at a time. I think definitely education is a part of it.
Yes.
And not being afraid of being open to what, educators have to say. And all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you know better, you do better.
Right.
I would say the communities are where the healing can happen. And I think my thoughts on like from a federal level is helping people have their needs met.
Absolutely.
Not their wants, but if we have medical care,
yes.
if we have secure
your
housing,
basic needs.
if we have, the income we need to live, because I think a lot of hate comes from people that are insecure in lots of different ways. So,
right, exactly.
From a federal level, if we can get people what they need, then they can all, immerse themselves in their communities and feel the love.
Right, exactly.
That's my perfect world there.
No, yeah.
I like your perfect world. Can I live in it with you?
Absolutely. You know you
We're
can.
not living paycheck to paycheck and
I know, right? Or we're scared of our neighbors.
So much stress and
exactly.
Right.
sorrow, but anyway.
Exactly. But who do you have for us, darling?
Well, I'm going to share actually a documentary I watched recently.
Yes.
It has lots of different aspects to it.
I love documentaries.
And one of the reasons I asked you this question about inclusion is it... Bonnie, don't look at my notes. Back of the paper.
Bonnie's cheating, y'all.
She's cheating off my notes. But one of the reasons I asked about inclusion is when I watched the documentary, it tied into another discussion we had is when Leah told us about The Awakened Woman by Tirani Trent.
Yes, I love her.
And we talked about the great hunger or, what breaks your heart. Mm-hmm. And watching this documentary, what broke my heart was a real lack of inclusion.
Yeah.
Seeing a whole population of people being persecuted for who they were.
Yeah.
And I had tears more than once during the movie.
Yes,
exactly. But it's a really great documentary.
Yes.
I'm calling it a movie. It's a documentary.
There you go. It's also, this is a breakthrough for Katie, for everybody. She was been really trying to find
what breaks
thing.
my heart.
Yes, exactly.
And it really comes full circle because in this case, I'm talking about LGBTQ rights.
Yes.
In that community. But then, with my job, I work with students that have developmental disabilities.
Yeah.
And one of my passions for them is helping them acquire job skills because the
that
world outside of high
includes them.
school
Yeah.
is really dismal for them. They don't have job opportunities. It's a very low percentage of students that graduate from high school with special needs that then become employed full time.
Right. Yes.
So that's a big thing. So I'm like, oh, that is what it's about.
It
you know,
is.
if our
I can
world's
see
not
that being that kernel that
included.
connects so many different things about just, being included in things. Yeah.
The documentary that helped me come to this
Yes.
enlightened point is The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson.
It's a great documentary. I second it.
It's so good.
Have either of you seen it?
I have not.
I haven't seen it, but I
Okay.
know
It's on your...
who that is.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
it's on
sweet.
Netflix. It was
Okay.
produced by Netflix, so you can find it there.
Yes.
And it's super good because there's so many threads of different things all wrapped up. So much history you learn from it.
Yeah.
From Marsha's life, from the time period that she lived in. So she lived in the time period. She was, I don't know her age, but I'm going to say she's probably in her prime, like 20s,
Right.
when the Stonewall riots happened.
Yes.
Which, when this is going to debut
Yeah.
on your podcast,
Yes.
is going to be the day before the anniversary of the Stonewall riots,
Yes.
which occurred on June 28th in 1969.
Sweet.
'Sweet.
53 years ago.
Right?
If my math is right.
It is absolutely
Okay,
right. And this event that happened in New York is really a huge influence on, why we celebrate Pride Month in June.
Yes.
Because this riot was when it happened in, I'm trying to remember what part of New York, like the Christopher
Greenwich.
Street, Greenwich Village.
When
Yeah.
Greenwich Village was in between its, really cool beatnik generation and its like crime wave.
Okay, so oftentimes I watch movies and I'm like, that's not a real life thing. And then sometimes it is.
Right.
So one of the things I read when researching this is that the Stonewall riots happened in clubs, and they were gay clubs, but they were all owned by the mob. Like the
Yes.
mob really owned
Oh, yeah.
clubs back in the 60s.
Especially in New York. New York and Chicago, yes.
I was like, that's just a movie thing. The clubs weren't owned by the mob.
That's just to add spice.
Oh, yeah.
But I believe the club was called Stonewall.
Yes.
Right.
The Stonewall Inn.
The Stonewall Inn, yes. And so it was frequently raided by the police. And during this occurrence, all the patrons were like, wait a second. We outnumber these police. I think it was like 10 to 500
I think we could
or
take
something
them.
like that. And they were like, we're tired of being arrested, persecuted for, our sexuality. It's time to make a stand. And they had a 2-night riot.
Yes.
Brick throwing, the whole shebang, fights.
Exactly. And who
They
threw
took
that
to the
first brick?
Okay. So that's,
I'm jumping the gun, but yes.
well, no, I just don't want to break your heart. But Marsha P. Johnson probably did not throw the first
Probably
brick.
not.
Yes. I think that's what's beautiful about Marsha P. Johnson is she's almost become like a folk legend
Yeah.
within her community.
Mhm.
And so she is going to be attributed with all those superpowers of
Right.
everything. But even Marsha during the time was like, I wasn't there right at the start. But she definitely came forward once the momentum was going because she had a passion for
Yeah.
fighting for the community, supporting, and she was a huge part of the organization that happened following those riots.
Yes.
A really moving force, very kind of like the mother of the movement.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The gay liberation.
Absolutely. And so that happened in 1969, and then in 1970, where I think it was like the 3 major cities, New York, San Francisco, maybe Los Angeles, had their first pride parades.
Right.
To celebrate the anniversary of the
And
Stonewall riots.
That was the one I talked about where 20 people showed up the first day and then 200 the next day and then arrests.
Absolutely. So it was huge because the community had never taken steps to organize prior to this.
Yeah.
So it was extremely important. And Marsha and her best friend, Sylvia Riviera, were at the very forefront of that. And so a lot of the documentary, it's not just about Marsha. It also focuses on Sylvia Riviera's story. And I was kind of talking to Leah about my impressions of the documentary. And I almost felt like I got to know Sylvia Riviera on a deeper level than I did Marsha P. Johnson.
Yeah.
But I found myself so drawn to Marsha P. Johnson because of her outgoing personality. She was gorgeous.
Yes.
She would always, well, not always, but frequently be seen walking around the neighborhood dressed in a floral crown, like a fresh floral crown.
Right.
Just absolutely gorgeous, and definitely like a very mothering, nurturing presence within the community.
Yeah.
So after the riots, she and Sylvia also started STAR, which was started in 1970. So the lingo is not going to translate to what we use today in terminology, but STAR stands for Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries.
Yes.
It was revolutionaries. I kind of wrote it
revolutionaries.
but what it was safe housing for gay men and women who were on the streets.
Yeah.
And had no safe place to street, that were sex workers.
Yeah.
And so Sylvia and
runaways
Marsha
for
took their
crying out
money
loud, too.
from sex work
Yeah.
and rented this space so they could stay somewhere safely off the streets.
Yeah.
So, and that was a huge movement that they started on their own, just the two of them.
Yes.
So I thought that was very amazing.
Change of the world.
But Marsha P. Johnson just had so much attitude and sass and friendliness, really a nurturer of the community. And you'll see that in the documentary. And I didn't find this out in the documentary, but I just have to share it because I thought it was so fun. That Marsha P. Johnson made her name. I don't know where Marsha came from. I'm guessing just like Marsha.
Right.
Johnson was from, what was it, the Howard Johnson, like, hotel
The
diners.
Hojo?
The Hojos.
Oh my
Johnson
gosh.
comes from Hojo.
Okay, all right,
and
got
the
it.
P stands for pay it no mind. So Marsha would whip out the pay it no mind frequently, and also would frequently use that when asked about her gender or sexuality.
I love that. Pay it no mind.
Like, people who have studied her in recent times talk about a very gender fluid personality dynamic, but yeah, she was like, pay it no mind.
I like it.
Yeah.
Marsha was born Malcolm, so it may be just like kind of
Keeping the
making
M.
a female version of their
Oh, for the
name,
Marsha?
maybe.
That's possible.
I dig
Welcome
it.
to Marsha. But
I'm just glad it's not Martha, because then I get on a Batman Superman problem, and so Marsha, I'm all about it.
so this documentary, you'll note that the death is first.
Yes.
It's the death and life
It
of
does
Marsha P. Johnson.
Bury it. Yes.
No, because one of the things that the documentary investigates throughout is Marsha's death, which occurred in 1992, and has a lot of questions still surrounding it. She was found dead in the Hudson River?
Yeah, the Hudson River,
Hudson
I think.
River.
Yeah, I
right
remember
outside
it was
Greenwich Village, off Christopher Street.
Yeah.
And it was ruled suicide.
Right.
But there was no note left, no evidence. Most of her friends did not believe she was suicidal.
Yeah.
But she had been very paranoid about lots of things happening in her life that she felt were dangerous to her. So this documentary is trying to explore, like, was it actually murder? What happened?
Yeah.
So that's a thread running throughout that, and I won't spoil that in case you guys,
Right.
not like it's a happy surprise, but I'm not gonna.
Either way,
I'm
she
not gonna
said
put
it's
out
in
that-
the title.
Yes.
However, justice. Yeah.
But one of the things that I really like about the documentary is they were following a recent trial of a transgendered woman who was murdered by a man. The man hit on her, and then found out she, was a man.
Right. Right.
And then murdered her.
Yeah.
Which is a very common thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we all have seen that in the news. It's very common that there's a lot of violence towards transgender people.
Right. Still a hate crime. Yes.
So that is a huge topic throughout this film,
Yeah.
and they weave in and out to this current court case. And I think from the inclusion standpoint, two parts of the movie really stuck out to me. And that was a scene. It was a recording of Sylvia Riviera, and also an instance of somebody being interviewed at this court case.
Gotcha.
And I kind of fumbled that up, but I wanted to back it up and tell you a little bit about Sylvia Riviera before
Yeah.
I told you about the scene.
Yes, please.
So Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Riviera were very close friends, but they were definitely like, I don't want to say yin and yang because for some reason that term bothers me.
They
There
kinda
were two
softened-
sides of a coin.
They kind of softened each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where Sylvia was kind of hard edge and
Yes,
Martha
yes.
was very gentle. But then at the same time, if any point they could switch. And Sylvia
Yeah.
could be very gentle and Marsha could be like, pay it no mind. You know what I mean? Like they worked well
But I would
together.
say they did. It was beautiful. But I would say overall, people would characterize Marsha as like the friendly, outgoing person, and
Yes.
Sylvia as much more militant
Fair.
and outspoken.
Yeah.
So one of the scenes was Sylvia at, I think it was like 1974 Pride Parade, where she went to speak to the big crowd, and they were booing her because they didn't want to hear what she had to say.
Yeah.
Which was where she called them out and said, you know, you guys have what you want right now, and you're abandoning the people who are still on the streets.
Yeah.
You're abandoning transgender people. You're not supporting the whole community and being inclusive of the whole community.
Right.
And she was booed and had to go off the stage.
Yeah.
It's like, that is such
But
bullshit.
she was bringing up a valid point.
Absolutely.
Though. She was calling it what it was. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it's just like, you can see it also so clearly because the other scene that was really made an impact with me was that outside the courthouse interview. And I hate to say, I can't remember now who they were speaking with, but the man spoke very passionately and is saying, you know, it was outside the courthouse. They're saying this courthouse across the lawn was filled when we were going for the rights for same-sex people to marriage.
Right, right.
To have marriage, legal marriage. And now we have this case where a transgendered individual has been murdered and the person may not even be convicted for it, and nobody's here. Nobody's shown up.
Right, right.
So where's the community
Where's
now?
the community, yeah. It's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to, like, hate on the community whatsoever.
Right, exactly.
But,
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, you know, any kind of group has its weak points or it's things it's overlooking.
Right.
And
yeah.
I think that just comes with being able to have that variety of voices.
Yes.
That we're not just all, you know, a bunch of middle-class white folks speaking and thinking we're speaking for a whole community.
Right.
Right.
And I think
It's
that
almost going
Marsha
with-
and Sylvia brought that to light.
All the letters in the rainbow matter. You know what I mean? It's one of those that's why we have so many letters, because it is about the inclusiveness. It is about all the queer folk in the rainbow are important and should feel seen and should have rights. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I thought this was just beautiful because you get a lot of history. You get the, you know, the history of the formation of the Pride parades and Stonewall riots. You get introduced to Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, but then you have the sadder, darker part that is, you know, what happened to her life.
Yeah.
And
You
why
get
did it in fairly
Kind of
short.
a mystery, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the narrator, oh, this is just shameful. I'm trying to remember her name.
Oh, yeah. She's fantastic.
She's beautiful
too.
and fantastic, and also
Yeah.
shares some of her story through it.
Right.
Being a transgendered individual.
And she feels like she let Martha, she has this
Marsha
call to
down.
action
Yeah,
that she
she
really
does.
needs to help Marsha's story. And so you just feel it in her that she will not give up and that she has to continue the story. And it's like, oh my gosh, honey.
It's so good. It's so good. I hope
Yeah.
you guys will all sense my
Yeah.
excitement over it and watch it.
Yes.
And then Sylvia Rivera's story just unfolds in like such a dynamic fashion too.
Yeah.
You see Sylvia, you know, so rejected and downtrodden after that experience on 74.
Yeah.
She leaves the city for a while, and then she comes back and is homeless for a while.
Yeah.
And there's even some footage of that time period of her life. But then she once again goes into like the political fray and fights for the rights and makes a name for herself, so much so that when there was like this global summit that was in Italy, she came and people were cheering for her and talking about how she's the mother of the movement.
Right.
And there's beautiful footage of that as well. So super good, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah. She kind of reinvents herself a couple of different times.
She
She is a
does.
little bit of a phoenix from the ashes. But then she's also, even though Marsha isn't around, I feel like Sylvia is still trying to
Oh,
evoke
yes.
her and keep
lot of
her
it's in
name
her
in memory.
memory.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's very powerful, the inclusiveness and the struggle and just, you know, the beauty of it.
And I think I loved it because it was just like stories so unlike stories I've heard before.
Right.
And just really, you know, opened my mind to different struggles that I haven't seen before. So I appreciated that. Because, you know, when I started my research, I'm like, I don't know enough history about LGBTQ, history, rights, successes,
Yeah.
struggles. So it made me really happy to watch this documentary and get a deeper feeling for that.
Yeah.
So,
Because in
highly
any
recommend.
kind of awareness, you know, you get
Yeah.
a little bit more compassionate. You know what I mean? You're able to
'Cause when you
understand a little bit more.
know better, you do better.
Exactly, Maya Angelou. I love that.
So go home right now and watch it.
Yes, absolutely. I second that.
The narrator maybe Victoria Cruz?
That
Yes.
sounds right.
Cruz?
Yes.
Cruz? Yeah. She was fantastic too. The whole thing was It was very well done.
Mhm.
The only thing my only regret was just I would have loved to learn a little bit more about Marsha.
Yeah.
There's little bits here and there that maybe you don't grab onto right away. Like it's mentioned that Marsha modeled for Andy Warhol.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
that's right. Yes.
And like all these big, like
Mhm.
incredible things. But yet there were years where she lived on the street.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Just imagining what her life would have been like
Yeah.
or was like.
exactly.
It's pretty mind blowing. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
Josh's favorite part in the movie was when Marsha was being interviewed and the person interviewing, it was like a news interview, said, okay, so what do you do for a job? And she's like, oh, honey, I don't have a job. I'm on welfare. She goes, I'm not going to get a job till I get all my rights. I was like, heck yeah.
I love that.
Exactly.
Right.
Perfect.
So that was a giggly, laughy part of the movie. I
Right.
shared my like call to action parts, but there were so many good parts.
So many of I'm gonna hang out.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Do you guys have any questions for me, or should I wrap us up for the night so you can go home and watch the doc?
I know, right? Exactly. No, I think on that note, I think you should wrap us up. I think you did a great job.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put so much enthusiasm
Yes.
into this.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I feel like I'm auditioning for you. Well, that wraps it up for LGBTQ Gals Month. Now we're off to be superheroes because
Avengers Assemble!
I wanted to say assimilate.
No.
Avengers
On
assimilate.
board. Avengers
Not bored.
Assemble.
July is,
Marvel Gals Month.
and Leah's not excited.
I'm very excited.
We hope to see you soon at the Gals Guide Library, and thank you for listening.
For show notes, links, and images from this week's show, visit galsguide.org. Want exclusive stuff like deleted bits and major bloopers? Become a Gals Guide patron today. Thanks for listening.